She's sentenced on count 2, the murder of Davion Flanagan, 15 years to life. She's sentenced on count 1, the murder of Dominic Russo, 15 years to life, to be served concurrent to each other.
15 years to life for 2 murder charges to run at the same time? Now, I've seen a lot of buzz online about Mackenzie Shirilla's sentencing, mostly from people who believe that the sentencing is too light. And this got me thinking. I've made a promise to my audience, to you, as America's attorney, to teach you the rules of the game. And isn't sentencing one of the most important rules to know? It's the way that we decide as a society how much to deter, punish, or incapacitate someone convicted of a crime. It's a foundational element of our justice system. So today, let's break down Mackenzie Shirilla's sentence and why she got the apparently light sentence that she got. In July of 2022, Mackenzie Shirilla pushed her car up to 90 to 100 miles per hour down a residential road and slammed into a brick wall, killing 2 passengers and severely injuring herself. The prosecution claimed that this was a murder-suicide attempt on Mackenzie's part to try and end her toxic relationship with one of the 2 victims. After choosing to waive her right to a jury trial, Mackenzie was found guilty by the judge on all 12 counts, including 4 counts of murder and 4 counts of felonious assault. And it's a little early in the video for this, but let's take a quick sidebar. Okay, so as I just mentioned literally a few seconds ago, Mackenzie was found guilty of 4 counts of murder and 4 counts of felonious assault, along with 4 other counts. And one question you might be asking is why 4 counts of murder when there were only 2 dead bodies? Well, Shirilla was guilty of the higher or more culpable murder charges. She was also technically guilty of the lesser included murder charge. You can't make too much light of this. It's not funny, but let me give you a simple example using candy. If you're accused by your family of eating all the blue M&Ms out of a bag of M&Ms, and you're also accused of eating the entire bag, if there's convincing evidence that you actually did eat all the M&Ms, then you are guilty of the offense of eating all of them, but also of the offense of eating the blue ones because you ate those too. And the same concept applies to the murder charges and the felonious assault charges. Of course, no one cares about that. This is really something just lawyers think about usually. And you're going to be convicted on both charges. So despite being convicted of eating the blue M&Ms and the entire bag, you will be sentenced for eating the whole bag. Unless you are Mackenzie Shirilla, apparently. More on that in a minute. To understand how the judge in this case came to her decision about the sentence, we need to first understand how sentencing is structured. The Sentencing Reform Act was signed into law in the federal court system in 1984, but before that, it was the wild, wild west in the practice of passing sentences. Judges could literally hand out whatever sentences they saw fit. This, of course, led to many inconsistent, unfair, and frankly, racist sentences. The SRA introduced federal sentencing guidelines that all federal judges had to follow. Now, in 2005, the SRA was downgraded to more of an advisory guideline instead of a mandatory one. This didn't necessarily give the judges the free rein they had in the past. They still have to begin each sentencing hearing with a calculation of the guidelines and use the ranges provided by the SRA as a starting point for their sentences. But this trial was in Ohio State Court and not in federal court. And things are, they're murkier in Ohio. They do have principles in Ohio, and this is what they say: to protect the public from future crime by the offender and others, to punish the offender, and to promote the effective rehabilitation of the offender, while using the minimum sanctions that the court determines accomplish those purposes without imposing an unnecessary burden on state or local government resources. Always consider the need for incapacitation, deterrence, rehabilitation of the offender, and restitution to the victim and or the public. Sentences should be commensurate with and not demeaning to the seriousness of offender's conduct and its impact on the victim, and consistent with sentences for similar crimes by similar offenders. Do not sentence based on the offender's race, ethnicity, gender, or religion. So it's right there in black and white. A judge can't consider that the double murderer is a young, white, cute female with lovely brown eyes. She must only take into consideration what the guidelines ask her to consider. Another thing that we must consider when it comes to doling out these sentences is what the purpose of a specific sentence is. Are we trying to deter the public from replicating the actions of a convicted criminal? Are we simply trying to punish a criminal for her actions? Are we attempting to keep the public safe by jailing a criminal away for a long period of time? In truth, It's all of them. It's a mixture. From case to case, it varies which matters more, but we always want to do all three of those things. Victims want to focus on punishment, the justice system wants to focus on reformation or rehabilitation, and law enforcement wants to focus on deterrence. It's a judge's job to find the closest correct balance between all three. Did the judge do it this time? So again, we know that Mackenzie Shirilla was sentenced to 15 years to life for both murders to run concurrently. What that means is that really only one of the deaths counted against her. But a lot of people saw that and went, 7.5 years for each life? What the? Well, that's correct, but it's also not exactly correct. But it doesn't look right. To dig in deeper, let's look at the reasons that have been announced by the Ohio Supreme Court that would legally justify the judge's downward deviation from what we would expect to see as a normal sentence for two premeditated, violent murders. There are two categories that Ohio looks at for this: the seriousness of the crime, or in her case, 8 crimes, and the likelihood of recidivism. That's the question, will she strike again? Under seriousness, these are the factors that the judge should have looked at. Number 1, did the victim induce and or facilitate the offense? You could say that her former boyfriend somewhat induced the murder if it's valid that they had a toxic relationship, whatever that means. But I cannot care about this because what about the passenger? Surely he didn't have to die just because these two lovers are always at each other's throats. Number 2, did she act under strong provocation? It doesn't appear so. She scouted the location, she picked the time and the place. According to the judge, it was cold and calculated and not provoked. Number 3, did she cause or expect to cause physical harm to person or property? Well, this one cannot count in her favor. As the judge said, she intended to kill. And finally, number 4, did substantial grounds exist to mitigate her conduct even if those grounds wouldn't constitute a defense? This could be that she had a drug problem, that he was abusive to her, that they had a drug problem together, that she was not yet an adult. It's hard to say, but if you're looking for an excuse to downward deviate here, I think the 4th prong is the one. Now let's look at recidivism. The factors that a judge can legally consider are these. Number 1, she has no prior juvenile delinquency adjudication and or no prior adult conviction. Number 2, that she led a law-abiding life for a significant number of years. Number 3, the murders were committed under circumstances unlikely to recur. And number 4, she shows genuine remorse. Now, as to number 1, has she ever killed before? Big deal! She killed twice that day. Nor would I care that she's had a crime-free life. She was just 17 years old when she did this. She had not lived a long crime-free life. As to number 3, were the circumstances likely to recur? Yeah, they are. It takes 2 to tango, and it takes 2 to toxically tango. If you have never found yourself in a toxic relationship, it may well be because you're not a toxic person. And good for you. But if you have been in a toxic relationship, it might be time to take a self-assessment. Seems very likely that she could have future toxic relationships. Swipe left, gentlemen. Not to mention that drugs can be a hard habit to beat. And the final prong, has she shown remorse? Honestly, I would say not much. She didn't come to court saying, I'm sorry, I deserve to be punished. She didn't own the horror of her actions. Is she sorry? Sure, yeah, but in terms of remorse prior to the conviction, this factor wouldn't sway me. So what really happened here? Did her large, sad eyes reduce her sentence? The reason she was given this sentence has to be related to her age, her sex, and the toxicity of the relationship. As a country, we have made great strides in the past decade towards recognizing the power imbalances inherent in many romantic or familial relationships between males and females. We've learned that women are often caught in situations from which they cannot extricate themselves. In short, we've gotten better at not blaming the victim. But now we're somewhat partially programmed to think of the woman as the victim, and that may be useful as a starting point. But is it always 1000% correct all the time? Is the woman never the perpetrator? And if she is the perp, and let's just say, for instance, it's clear that the woman we're talking about is a double murderer, then if we don't slam the prison door in her face, is that because we are blaming the victim, this time the boyfriend? Is it? And what about the passenger? Because just 7.5 years per death is a joke. Here are some of the things that you can go to prison for more than 7.5 years in Ohio. abducting someone without hurting them physically at all, creating an explosive but never setting it off, GTA, Grand Theft Auto, and the list goes on. Lots of these crimes don't involve harm, much less permanent harm to another person. Mackenzie Shirilla got a very, very sweetheart deal. Many people, including the victims' families, have said that there are no real winners in this case, and that is true. Mackenzie may never breathe free air again, but neither will her victims. And there is a chance that Mackenzie will. The same predisposition that the judge had that got Mackenzie a laughably light sentence for intentionally killing 2 people is the same predisposition that the parole board will likely have that will allow her to get out of prison in the least amount of time. And now that you know a little bit more about the sentencing process, let's bring back a familiar question. How much time do you think Mackenzie Shirilla should have received? Do you think that her sentence was too light? Too heavy? Drop your pro se opinion down below in the comments section to let me know that you made it this far in the video. And then drop a sub to let me know that you've enjoyed the fact that you made it this far in the video. I'm sure you remember this from the last video, but I'm on my way to 50K subs and you can help me get there. I'll be back next week with more videos, but in the meantime, you can check out these. Bye.